This is a presentation from the Alverno College School of Business. Hi, I'm Dan Matre. I'm an assistant professor at Alverno College, and today with this screencast I'd like to talk a bit about understanding gross profit margin and markup. The contents include definitions. Also, we'll be talking about 1, 2, and 3-step distribution models. There is an interactive worksheet. It's embedded in this screencast. Ask your instructor if it's available on Moodle as well as this PowerPoint presentation. We'll also talk about industry norms and how you can acquire those, and also that there is tremendous value in understanding gross profit margin and the difference between those margins and markups. But first we need to back up a little bit. We need to define the gross profit because that's part of the margin and markup calculations. So quite simply, the gross profit, and it's in dollars, that's important to recognize that, or currency from your country. Gross profit is sales less the cost of goods. So if we take an example of an artist selling an original leather bag for $300, the artist cost, let's assume, is $200, and that cost of goods is essentially the materials and labor to create that leather bag. So the gross profit is $100. So if we look at the formula below, $300 minus $200 is $100. So that's gross profit. Now in service businesses, cost of goods can also be known as cost of sales, which is essentially for instance, in the design business, it's your sales cost also added plus, say, the time of the designers and any material that they would need to get the work done. So that's gross profit. If we look at gross profit margin, now that's percentage, not dollars or currency. Gross margin is gross profit divided by sales. So if we take the same artist example, the artist sells a leather bag for $300. The artist makes a gross profit of $100, which we saw in the previous slide. The gross margin is 33%. So the formula below, 100 divided by $300 equals 0.33, and that's also 33%. So when you hear someone say, oh, we have a gross margin of 33%, that's how this has been determined. And sometimes I'll just refer to it as margin. Now a markup is different, and people confuse these. I think maybe part of the reason people confuse these is because the markup is also in percentage. Margin, markup, I don't know, maybe there's a similarity in the words too. But markup is the amount the cost of goods for a product must be increased to yield a desired sell price. So the formula is sales divided by cost of goods minus 1 equals the markup. So the artist creates a leather bag at a cost of $200, cost of goods. The artist believes the market will pay $300 for the leather bag. The markup is then 50%. So in the formula below, 300 divided by 200 minus 1 equals 0.5, which also equals 50%. Now what's interesting is that if you can also take this markup factor, so the minus 1, if we slide that over and we just combine it with the 0.5, so if you take 1.5 times $200 cost of goods, that will yield a $300 price. So markup, when you have these different components, you can work this up or down depending on what you want to achieve or where you're starting. So now let's switch over to the spreadsheet. If you have access to this, it is interactive. I'm going to step out. Well, let me explain the components of this first. So we have the artist leather shoulder bag. As we said before, cost of goods was $200, and then the sell price was $300. And this column is essentially just transferring those formulas that you saw earlier. So the gross profit was $100. The gross profit margin in percentage was 33%, and the markup, as you recall, was 50%. So you can see how these translate over. So, okay, now I'm going to jump out of presentation mode, and I want to activate this portion of the spreadsheet so you can see how one can manipulate these inputs. So what you do is you just enter values into the yellow cells. Your version may or may not be protected, but don't manipulate these numbers in here. They'll work for you. So, for instance, let's say, for example, at this crash show, which an artist is at, this is one-step distribution. So the artist is just selling direct to the end user. But let's say that artist is at the show, and the last show that she was at, it was $300 was a great price point. But let's just say that other artists are now selling the bag for $250. So she has to reduce her price to be competitive. But so you can see she's now only making $50 versus $100 on that sale. And also gross profit has reduced and markup has been reduced too. But from now on out, we're going to talk mostly about gross profit margin. Okay, so that's how you can manipulate this spreadsheet. So that's one-step distribution. Now let's just take a quick look at industry gross profit margins. These are relatively easy to find. They vary a little bit depending on who's reporting them. But I've just taken a sampling here randomly and shown a range. You can see that beverage manufacturing, their gross profit margins are 57%, with the net, just for reference, is 18%. But if we look at the bottom of this chart, gas stations, look at that, gross profit margin of only 12, let's call it 13%, and net of 1.7. I've bolded a couple of these, clothing retailers and distributors, because we use these downstream in the presentation. So let's just say clothing retailers are 49% and distributors are 24%. So keep those numbers in mind. Because now if we go to a two-step distribution, let's just take the same leather shoulder bag design and style, but it's being offered by Coach, high-end brand retailer. Now this is two-step distribution because you have the end user, you have the Coach retailer, and now you have a manufacturer. Now one way to understand these steps is that just count the number of buyers. So the end user is buying it from the retailer. Secondly, the Coach retailer is buying it from the manufacturer. So those are two buyers, two-step distribution. So what I've done is entered the same $300 value, and then I manipulated the 152 to get to this number so that it would generate this 49% gross profit margin. And I just made the assumption that the manufacturer needs a 30% gross profit margin, so that cost that manufacturer has to hit is this amount. So the manufacturer sells the bag to the retailer for $152, and then the Coach retailer sells it to you, the end user, at $300. So, and again, I'm not going to manipulate this for the sake of time, but if you can manipulate these yellow cells to get the desired gross profit margins. So that's a case of two-step distribution. You can see the manufacturer now cannot make this for $200. The manufacturer has to be more efficient and build the bag for $107. Now there are still some three-step distribution models out there. An example is office supply stores. And Entrepreneur magazines claim that the typical gross profit margin for distributors is 25%. So let's use that instead of the 23 or 24 from the previous slide. So again, the end user, $300 is what they're paying for the bag in this office supply store. The retailer, as we saw before, needs a 49% gross profit margin. So that means 153 is what they have to buy it from the distributor. and the distributor says, well, I needed my 25% margin, so Mr. Manufacturer, I need to buy it from you for $80. So everybody's happy here. Everybody has their gross profit margins that they need. But what happens if the demand for the bags goes down and the end user says, I'm not going to pay that, I'm only going to pay $200 for that leather bag? Well, if the retailer still says, I want my 49%, the distributor says, I want my 25%, and the manufacturer says, well, it cost me $80 to make this, this is not going to work. So the manufacturer has to reduce the cost, or the distributors and retailers have to adjust their demands on gross profit margins. So you can see all this all interconnects. So key takeaways I think we've accomplished today is that you have a better understanding of the difference between gross profit margins and markups. You need to recognize your industry gross profit and what those norms are. Also understand where you're at in this distribution model and evaluate that. But most importantly, that you now value the importance of adequate gross profit margins. This is Dan Matre with Alverno College and the School of Business.